Hello, everyone. Welcome back to my channel. I haven't posted in the last 3 months because your girl was getting her life together to take step one. I successfully took it, which is why I am now back to posting. I don't find out if I passed for a couple of weeks. So, send the prayers up. But I felt good overall going into test day. Um, but overall, that's not like why we're here. So, I thought since I've successfully done and passed through the preclinical portion of my medical education, now would be a good time to talk about studying and how I personally studied um, as a first year and a second year medical student. The second year medical student video will be uploaded at a later time, but I want to at least start off with how to study as a first year medical student and what I did that would help me be successful. And so let's get right on into it. So the first thing that I did was I used Anki. I know it's like a huge point of contention for some people, but I personally found Anki to be really useful. I will say that you can't use Anki for every class. It's better for courses that do require rote memorization, like anatomy or biochemistry and classes of that nature. um, it's not as good for classes like physiology just because you truly do need to understand what's going on. And there's so many exceptions in the realm of physiology where you would think something is going to go one way, but it doesn't. Um, so I would caution people about using Anki for those types of courses. But overall, if it's just a rote memorization based course, I think Anki is totally okay. I personally paid the 24.99 for the application. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry. I have something in my eye. I paid 24.99 for the application so I could have it on all of my devices, not only just my laptop. So I also have Anki set up on my. Ooh, that is really bright. Let me turn that down so I don't blind y'all. That was ridiculous. Yeah. So this is the Anki that I have set up. As you can see, there's some step one stuff on here, but we're just only tackling first year. And as you can see, there's a bunch of cards. Um, but I found Anki to be useful if you know how to use it. And I will say making your own cards is time consuming. So I didn't make my own cards. I personally just used a bunch of pre-made decks that were floating around. Um, and I found those to be really helpful. Um, you can make your own cards because, sometimes I would make my own cards just because the pre made ones weren't really doing it for me. But I would try to steer clear of that just because it is pretty time consuming unless you're an Anki expert. And there's plenty of videos floating around on YouTube that show you how to work Anki. The biggest thing I will say though is please, please, please preserve the health of your fingers. Don't give yourself carpal tunnel. 88 or sorry, 8-bit dough Anki remote. This is a lifesaver. And once you get this set up, you literally are just clicking. You can set up the keyboard how you want to, and it does make going through Anki a lot faster rather than having to be stuck at your keyboard and pressing the keys. And it's nice because then you can kind of lay out, relax while you go through your Anki deck or decks, plural, if you're studying for step or whatever. But this is mainly for first year, so y'all aren't at that point yet. But I 10 out of 10 would recommend getting this 8-bit dough remote. And I do have it linked in the description box on where to buy this. The price is $19.99 before taxes and shipping in that of that nature. But yeah, this is one of my best investments that I found on Amazon was this 8-bit dough remote. So let me put that away. And it's nice too because the one thing about the 8-bit Anki remote is that it can hold its charge for a long time. So you can maybe get 3 days worth of studying before you have to charge your remote again, which might not seem like a super long time, but in like med school days and years, that actually does pay off if you're not having to charge this bad boy every day. So I'd say it's worth the investment. And I think it's pretty affordable. I try not to have people spending too much money because honestly, sometimes medicine does feel like a money grab. And then you're just sitting there like, darn, another thing that I have to pay for. But I think that one is worth the investment. So in terms of studying, you can use Anki. If you're not a huge Anki fan, I know some people that use Quizlet. That's also a really good way to study in medical school. I think I know like like a handful of classmates that use Quizlet, and that's worked well for them if you don't like Anki and you don't like the interface. And then I know some people who just don't use Anki or Quizlet at all. They just do good old like talk and chalk. They take their notes, annotate them, and that's good for them. And I mean, whatever works for you. I don't believe you should reinvent the wheel just because you're in medical school now. I would at least try studying the way that you did in undergrad and see if that works for you in medical school. Some people it does, some people it doesn't. You do have to kind of play with it. And I will say, for first year medical students, do not be afraid if you have to change your study style between different blocks of either if you're doing systems based learning or organ based learning. That is totally normal if you have to change your study habits. A lot of people do. I was one of those people. I had to change my study habits, not because it's not because let me see how I want to phrase this. I had to change my study habits just because I found that there were other methods that were more time efficient. And definitely, I will say you want to be efficient as a learner in medical school because as you progress through your medical education, your time really does, your free time gets smaller and smaller. So you do want to learn how to study effectively, just because you do still want to enjoy your life. And I'm not a believer in the fact that some people are like, oh, yeah, as medical students, you need to be studying all day. I didn't study all day in medical school. I would cut myself off, I think, by 5, 6 p.m., and the rest of the evening was mine. I'm a huge supporter of people taking time off from studying, um, and just, dedicating themselves to being a human being. Some of the first year medical students, you're going to be coming in with, like spouses, partners, even animals. They need love too, and they need your time and attention. So you definitely don't want to be studying all the time. And you still want to be feeding into those positive relationships. So I am a huge believer in setting aside time just for yourself and your people that are most important to you in your life, because the studying is always going to be there. You're always going to feel like, oh, I don't know enough, but sometimes you do. You know more than you think you do. Um, so that would be my biggest thing for study habits, is making sure that you set aside at least one day or so out of the week. I had classmates that they would set aside Saturdays were their day off, or some people it was the whole weekend. So they would not study on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And they still passed all their classes and it worked out well for them. So, figure out a study schedule that works well for you. Speaking of a study schedule, I personally used a pass tracker. So, for those of you that don't know, a pass tracker is essentially counting how many times you've gone through your lecture material, uh, just because medicine definitely is the analogy of drinking water out of a fire hose. It is a lot of information coming at once. And so the best way to handle that is to break it up into small pieces, but also make sure that you're revisiting those small pieces before exam day. And just because you never know what you might get tested on. Sometimes my professors were nice enough to be like, hey, wink, wink, this is high yield. Like, oh my gosh, if you understood nothing from this lecture, you definitely want to understand this. Um, and they were right. So I would definitely pay attention to one, learning objectives. And if you watch lecture, I'm not saying you have to watch it live. I do know some schools you do have to watch lecture live, but at least for my institution, lectures were pre-recorded. So watch lecture. You can watch it at 2 times speed. I would say no more than 2 times speed though, just because honestly, if they're talking like so fast that you can't even understand it, you're going to spend about the same amount of time running the audio back because you didn't catch what was said. But one, giving yourself some like a day off or two, or figuring out when your rest days are going to be. Two, if you decide to watch lecture, go through the learning objectives. And usually, if you can follow all the learning objectives, you should be fine for exam day. Um, at least that was my experience. If you knew the learning objectives, you would be fine. And more importantly, for the past tracker, I used Tay Leon Butler's past tracker. She's another YouTuber who is fantastic. She is at UCLA. Yes, UCLA. She's at UCLA. And I believe now she should be entering her 4th year. So I used her past tracker. And here's a little image of what that looks like. And so as you can see, it's divided up by week. Um, green for if you watch lecture, green for if you did the Anki cards. If you're not using Anki, or Quizlet, this section won't really apply to you as much, but it's just there and you can delete columns that you don't need. And I also have this past tracker linked in my description box. And so the ideal amount of passes based on this past tracker is 5. And I'd say that's a pretty solid number um, for making sure you go through the material. And now the biggest thing is, well, what counts as a pass? I would say watching the lecture and taking notes on it counts as a pass. Maybe doing some questions around that topic counts as a pass. And so you want to have at least 5 passes through the different lectures that you go through throughout the week, just to make sure that you've really embedded this information into your brain. Um, and, you know, that you're like keeping up with the material, but also revisiting the old material because it's a psychology effect called the recency effect. You're going to remember either the first few things that you looked at or the last few things that you looked at. So that's how learning works. And so that key is, well, how do you catch the stuff in the middle? It wasn't the first thing that you looked at, but it definitely wasn't the last. And so the best way to do that is through spaced repetition, which is basically what the past tracker is accounting for. And it's nice because on this past tracker, there's like a before class column, after class column that you can help or that will help you establish what you're going to do before a class. So for me personally, before a class, I would preview the lecture slides if they've been uploaded on time because I like to know what the heck I'm going to be learning the day before, just so I can I can do my research and gather all the necessary supplemental materials that I need to study. And so one of the biggest materials that I used was Ninja Nerd. Absolutely love Ninja Nerd. He's on YouTube, and I swear this man has a video on every topic that you learn in your first year of medical school. He is fantastic. So I would watch Ninja Nerd videos after class was over just to solidify any areas of confusion or points of confusion I had about certain courses. And I found that to be super helpful. Another big resource that people use a lot in medical school is Boards and Beyond. Um, and essentially, Boards and Beyond is just this database of videos where they go and cover different topics that you'll be exposed to throughout the first 2 years of your medical education. And well, that's if you're on like the whole 2 year track thing. Because my school, I want to preface this, we are not on a 1.5 year track. We are on a 2 year preclinical track. And then the last 2 years of your medical education are you're getting your rotations, your clinical experience before you apply to residency. So I know that if you are on the 1.5 type of program, things do a little more is crammed in a shorter amount of time, just because you do sit for step earlier than other institutions that are on a 2 year program. So at least I know for my institution, the ideal date or months that they would like for people to sit for their step exams and take step one is May, June, and a little into July, but they really do prefer May and June. Where I know at some institutions, if they're on the 1.5, they're taking step in like March. So, make sure whatever school you go to, you do keep that in mind. But in terms of preclinical information as a first year student, Boards and Beyond is really good, just because it's very concise and succinct. Geez, I obviously need to drink my coffee. It's succinct, and it's just a really nice review, because I feel like sometimes professors, when they're so engrossed their in their area of research, they kind of lose how to explain it to other people and explain it to people like they're an idiot. Because I know that works for me. Like, please explain this to me like I'm a dodo, please, because some days I do feel like a dodo. So I really do need the real layman's terms breakdown. And I know like sometimes professors struggle with that. And so Boards and Beyond is a really good way of someone who's an expert in this field, but they know how to break it down to a level that's very digestible as a first year medical student. So I would say Boards and Beyond is a good investment. Um, yeah, Boards and Beyond, Sketchy. I really did enjoy Sketchy. And Pixarize. Pixarize is a really good resource. I just happen to be a campus ambassador for Pixarize, and I will say that Pixarize and Sketchy, they're essentially the same. But I would say Pixarize is a little more out there with their associations, and it's so weird that it works and it sticks. So I personally really liked Pixarize because some of the skits are just so weird. And it's nice because Pixarize, in comparison to Sketchy, the videos tend to be shorter. So if you are someone that struggles with like ADHD or ADD and you do have a shortened attention span, I would say that you might lean more towards Pixarize over Sketchy, just because sometimes Sketchy has 30-minute videos. And I don't know about you, but like 30-minute videos, that's really time consuming. I'm not trying to sit here for half an hour watching the same video about the same topic. Um, so I will preface that. Like, you could use those for first year, but honestly, you don't really need to. You could get by without it, honestly, but it is nice. I will say the plus side is that you do get that exposure to Sketchy, because for preparing for STEP, you will heavily rely on either Sketchy, Pixarize, or both. Some people I know, they did use both and it did work for them. Sorry, that was like my cat feeder dropping food, even though I don't think it should have been dropping food at that hour. Okay. So in terms of studying, let me just recap. So Pass Tracker, establishing a schedule, how many days off you're going to give yourself, and more importantly, limit yourself to a few resources. So There's so many study materials out there for medical students as a first year that it can feel very overwhelming. Just pick like maybe one or two things and stick with it. So some of the things I brought up, like Pixarize, Sketchy, Boards and Beyond, Ninja Nerd, that's already 4 resources. Narrow it down to 2. So you can do Sketchy and Pixarize, Sketchy and Boards and Beyond, Sketchy and Ninja Nerd, whatever that is, like whatever your combination is, stick with it. And if you realize later down the line, like after the first exam, like, darn, this isn't working for me, then yeah, switch out the resources. You're not married to it. Just give it a good try though before you hop to another resource. Um, in that vein, if you do find yourself struggling as a first year medical student, please, 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 please reach out for help as soon as things start to go south. So, if that means like you're emailing professors, if you get an exam score that was lower than what you wanted, you're meeting with tutors if that's available at your institution. Um, you need to start doing that as soon as possible because you want the institution to see that you are invested in your education and that you're not too lax about things going sideways, because showing that interest and that desire to be better and improve really comes a long way as a first year medical student when it comes to remediation, if it boils down to that, or just flat out like dismissal. And a lot happens on those professionalism and academic standing committees. And so the biggest thing that they use against students and leverage against students is, did you show that you were actively engaged in your education? Did you do everything possible um, to avoid, sitting here being in poor academic standing? Um, and they're even going to ask the professors. They're going to be like, "Hey, have you heard from this student, or did they only reach out to you after they like failed the course or they failed 2 exams?" So I will say you do have to advocate for yourself, and you need to start doing that earlier rather than later because it really does make a difference. Um, just because I'm not even to like scare people and first year students, but it does happen. You do have students that end up remediating either a course, or if things go really south, they end up remediating the full academic year. Um, and you can still recover from that, honestly. Like, I know in the moment it does feel like the end of the world. Um, but you can still remediate either a course or the entire academic year and still go on and match into residency. Um, Even with step being pass fail, I mean, step 2 is still scored. So, you can show growth from, not doing as well at the beginning academically. Um, but before it even gets to that, try to be engaged. If you feel like stuff is going bad, get help sooner than later. I will say that in terms of study habits. Um, and if your institution has like academic consulting, please meet with those people because sometimes I just want to say med students were a little delusional and we will convince ourselves that, like, oh no, this was just a bad exam. I actually knew what was happening. Did you really know what was happening? Or do you really need to go back to the drawing board and reevaluate how you study? Um, and it is a little painful. I will say that in terms of studying as a first year medical student, one of the, if you get nothing else out of this video, the most important thing that you can do is be good at self reflection, because you're going to have moments where you need to recognize that maybe you could have done better or you didn't give something your all. And that can lead you um, in those moments where you're not giving your all, it can kind of deviate and put you on a path that you might not want to go down as a student. Um, Rather than blaming other external factors, sometimes you will have to look at yourself as a first year medical student and be like, okay, maybe it's me. Maybe I'm the problem. And that's okay. That's literally okay. That's what this whole process is about. That's why I said at the beginning that you will sometimes have to adjust your learning style. But the only way to do that is you have to be really good at looking at yourself and saying, okay, was this exam just hard? Or was it because I didn't do what I needed to do to get the results that I wanted? Um, And that's the truth, and I will say, it is a little painful to be that self-reflective sometimes, but it will serve you well in the end, in terms of your first year of medical school. And yeah, just make sure you're taking stock of yourself as you go through your first year. So another recap in terms of study tips. So first off, Anki or no Anki, that's totally up to you. If you don't like Anki, you can do Quizlet, or you can just not do Anki at all. Two, establishing a good study schedule, making sure you give yourself time off because your brain deserves a break and you deserve a break because you're still a human and you still deserve to go out and enjoy life. Three, narrow it down, narrow down your resources so you don't get resource overload because that can also contribute to first year not going the way you want it to. And more importantly, please, 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 if you see that your grades and everything are not going in the way that you want it to, get help earlier rather than later. Because it really does make a difference between whether or not you're granted the chance to remediate a course or the school tells you, too bad, so sad, you're going to have to start the first year over again. Oh, but I will say, actually, in that vein, make sure you look at your school's policy for remediation, because I know some schools you actually can fail two courses before. If you fail a third one, it's an automatic redo of the entire academic year. Um, Not that you want to like be counting classes, like, oh yeah, failed one, I still got one more to go, but it is something to keep in mind. Just, you know, just in case. Just know your rights as a student. I'll say that. Not that you're going in with the intention of like, oh, I'm going to fail classes, but just have an idea of how your institution is structured, um, and what that looks like and what remediation looks like. Um, Especially if you have to pay for it, whether it's in-house or not in-house. Usually if it's not in-house, you do have to pay for it. And the loan money that they give you to live as a first year is not usually enough to cover the summer remediation. And um and some schools it is in-house, so then it's like you just retake your lowest exam or whatever that might be. But yeah, just make sure as a first year student, like, you're giving it your all, but also know your rights as a student and just be well versed in your school's remediation policies and what that looks like. Just gonna leave that there. And I will say, at least for me, for studying as a first year student, I use Notability. I found Notability to be a little better than what's that one people like? Some people use OneDrive, but sometimes OneDrive has connection issues. And I know like some of my friends, they lost their like weeks worth of notes. So I stuck to Notability. I really liked it. There's a sticker feature. You can annotate slides and you don't lose any data as long as you make sure you back up your like iPad or whatever device that you're using. Um, but outside of that, um, Yeah, I just preferred Notability. Um, and Notability is nice because you can make folders and segment the folders off of different topics, and you can have groups for the larger course. So it just made it easier for me to organize things. I'm a very type A person, so I really thrive off of organization. And I found Notability to be the best for that. Also, in the vein of study, this really isn't more studying, it's more just like cyber safety. I believe I have a link in the description box for what are they called? Webcam covers. Um, because with this whole digital age and transitioning to using a lot of Zoom, you do want to protect your privacy because I mean, you can set up Zoom to where your video doesn't automatically turn on when you enter a Zoom meeting, but some of my classmates did not figure that out. And you just don't want to have any accidents. Or, like as a male, like you being shirtless in bed because you overslept and now you got to hop on Zoom. The webcam cover that's linked in my description box is a lifesaver because even if that camera turns on and you see that green dot, the cover will just show a black screen and that gives you time to get yourself together, put on a shirt. For my other ladies that wear bonnets to bed, do rags, whatever, um, it can spare you from your other classmates seeing what you wear to bed. um, like, or if you're not ready, you're trying to make yourself breakfast in the morning. So I definitely would recommend investing in a webcam cover as a first year medical student. um, I think the one linked in the description box, let me check it. This is like another pretty affordable purchase because I don't believe in like making folks spend a lot of money. I'm all about free 99 and discounts. So yes, and I just checked the price. So the webcam covers that I have linked in the description box are $5.99 and it's a 3-pack. So that's a pretty solid deal. 10 out of 10 would recommend investing in a webcam cover because the amount of times where I was not looking very presentable and my webcam cover gave me the chance to be in the meeting on Zoom, but like behind the scenes running around, getting my face together. Uh, it was a godsend, honestly. Um, and then Jesus Christ, I'm already at like 33 minutes, so I'll wrap this up. Um, but yeah, no, give this video a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Please like, comment, subscribe. Um, please let me know if there's any videos that you would want me to film. I'm in a nice sweet spot of I'm done with second year. I've taken step and I'm not starting my clerkships or rotations. Sorry, that's like my school uses the term clerkship, but I'm not starting my rotations just yet. Um, so I have a little bit of free time. So no, please let me know if you like the video. Um, and if you have any questions about studying as a first year medical student that I didn't address in this video, I'm more than happy to respond in the comments. Um, and then, of course, I'll try to work on getting some videos out to everyone about my life as a third year medical student and maybe playing some games about maybe having some polls about guessing what my first rotation is going to be and just showing you what it's like to finally start working in the hospital as a medical student. Um, but yeah, no, make sure you like, comment, subscribe. Um, I'm totally open to maybe doing a follow up to this video with more specific questions. Um, Maybe even an Anki tutorial. I mean, I know there's a bunch of Anki tutorial videos that exist, but I'm more than happy to do whatever y'all want me to do. So, to those that make it to the end of this video, thank you so much. I appreciate your support, and I'll see y'all next time.